I've been in real estate for over 10 years now, and when it comes to buying a house, you might be doing it wrong. In this video, I'm gonna go over the most important things to do and know when it comes to purchasing a property. One of the first things to do is evaluate the neighborhood. And that sounds obvious, but I'm gonna give you a couple specific things that you can do that will help you make a better buying decision. So one thing you can do is go on Google Maps and just virtually drive around the neighborhood, see what is around the neighborhood. Are you close to parks? Are you close to cell phone towers? Are you close to a gas station? Are there schools nearby? You wanna get a good sense of the neighborhood because sometimes, if you just see a property and you don't spend too much time kind of driving around it, you might not know that there's this huge cell phone power plant, a couple blocks down, and maybe you don't want to live next to that. Or maybe there's this beautiful scenic trail that not too many people know about that's like right in the community. But the Google Maps is definitely one of the first things I do when I'm looking at a potential property for myself, for a client, whoever it might be. And then also you should read as many articles as you can about that neighborhood. I could become a neighborhood expert in about 30 to 60 minutes on pretty much any neighborhood in the United States. I'd pull up Google Maps, I'd read 10 or 20 articles, I'd get a pretty good sense of that neighborhood. I could probably tell you like 10 or 20 things about that area. And then a thing I would add to that is the commute. So you want to have a very good sense of the commute. I remember I was looking at a property where they had sold it after 1 year. And I was trying to figure out why. It looked like a nice house, no potential issues. And they had said that the buyer had purchased it from overseas and they weren't aware of how bad the commute was. So they were commuting, I think it was from like Ashburn to Alexandria, which depending on what part of Alexandria could easily be like an hour each way. So they were spending like, let's say 2 hours on the road. So you want to even like test your commute or at least read articles or pull up Google Maps during rush hour and get a good sense of how long the commute is, what routes you're gonna be taking for the commute, different options for the commute. Can you metro, bus, ride share, figure out those options and really understand the commute. The next thing you want to do is evaluate in person at least 10 different properties. And ideally they should be kind of in that same neighborhood, price range style that you're looking at. And it's definitely okay to look at properties way out of your price range, way below your price range in areas maybe that you're not even looking at seriously, because more times than not, I can tell you sometimes people will say, oh, actually after seeing this property in person, I actually like this neighborhood better, or I like this style of property better, even though it initially wasn't even on your radar. But one mistake I made when I was purchasing my first property is that once I got my approval letter, I just basically bought like the first thing I saw. I think I saw like 2 properties and then I bought one of them. Whereas because I was so excited, I was like, I got my approval letter. There's all these properties I could purchase. I just jumped into the first one. And looking back on it, even if you're really excited and you have to buy something in the next week or two, at least pull up like 10 options, run through 10 different properties, and then you can make a much better buying decision if you're evaluating 10 properties versus just looking at 1 or 2. The next thing you want to do is look at properties quickly if you like them. So if a property checks all your boxes or checks most of the boxes, right location, right price range, condition, everything, you should be like paranoid and try to get out there as soon as possible to look at that property. Chances are it might not be around a week or 2 from now. I've had people where they're like, hey, can we see this property like Tuesdays from now at 6 o'clock? And I'm like, the property probably won't be available then. Sometimes it's like the first offer and the very first person that sees it. And if you make like a compelling offer, the listing agent might not wait until the weekend. Some sellers just want to get a solid offer, locked in, hassle-free type of offer, and just move on. So if it's an attractive property, a good agent like myself and my team, or someone that I could refer you to, would be able to show you that property the day it goes on the market, or whatever the soonest availability is with your schedule. You can't wait around with these properties nowadays. There's not a ton of inventory, so if something looks good, make sure you text your agent, call your agent, email your agent, and say, look, let's go ahead and see this like today, tomorrow type of thing. Another thing you want to make sure of is that you're working with a recommended local real estate agent with great reviews. It really needs to check all 3 of those boxes, because if you're in a competitive scenario and you're going up against a recommended agent that has lots of great reviews, they're going to be able to run circles around, your agent that's never done a deal before, has no reviews, it's just your cousin or your friend. Everyone has their license nowadays, but you really want to only work with agents that have dozens of 5-star reviews, are local, responsive, and know what they're doing. It's a competitive market out there. You can't just use anybody. And if you're looking for a great agent and team to work with in the DC area, I would love to help you out. We have dozens of great reviews, are super responsive. You can shoot me a text or give me a call at the number below. And then if you're looking for agents nationwide, a good local, well-reviewed agent, I can also put you in touch with different agents nationwide. So definitely reach out to me no matter where you're looking in the United States, because a bad or inexperienced agent can really really mess up a deal. And I was just working with an agent. This lady had no reviews, using a title company that wasn't even licensed in the proper state, so they couldn't even do the transaction, using one of the worst home inspectors, and on and on and on. Didn't know the comparable sales. And it's really a disservice, to the buyer. It just makes the whole process much more difficult than it should be. A good agent is going to have an all-star team around them in terms of home inspectors, lenders, title companies. They'll understand the numbers, they'll understand how competitive or maybe how not competitive the market is, and they'll know how to craft offers that are good for you but aren't like overpaying or anything like that. And that leads me to the next point, is that you should have a well-rated, responsive lender on your side. I see too many people that just use online lenders that promise the world. Their interest rates are crazy low, but then you look them up, they might not have the best reviews. It's just a 1-800 company. You can't reach anybody. So what you want to do is maybe ask some friends, ask your real estate agent to provide you with a few good, local responsive lenders. And then maybe you can also look those lenders up, make sure they have good reviews. And it is okay to shop around a little bit if you want to. Some lenders are going to have obviously different programs than others. But the biggest thing with buying a house is really like the timelines. You don't want your lender to delay the timelines. And if you're using a lender with a 1-800 number that's super far away and not very responsive, I've seen it happen so many times where they delay closings. They also promise a very low interest rate, and then by the time you get to closing, it's an entirely different interest rate. So just make sure your lender is well rated, recommended. And if you want to shop, 2 or 3 lenders to see their best rates, that's fine. But just make sure that you can get in contact with this person, and also that they can close quickly. If a lender says they can close in 45 days, that's like the equivalent of like 2 years in a competitive market. You want a lender that can close like 21 days, 24 days, maybe 30 days at the max, because if you're trying to find your dream house, the listing agent is going to recommend to their seller that they choose an offer with a lender that they know can get the deal done. So with my buyers, I always have my lender call the listing agent and say, look, we're well qualified, we can close quickly, that type of thing. So that helps us win a lot of contracts. The next thing you want to do when buying a house is evaluate the comparable sales. So if you see a property, you don't want to just be like, okay, I'll offer 10K above, 100K above, or I want to come in 50K below. You should already have a sense from doing your research of what the general values in the neighborhood are. And then you should have your real estate agent send you the comps, the comparable sales. And they'll send you like the last 5 or 6 sales in that neighborhood. And then that'll give you a much better idea of where you can come in at. Because I've seen some people, I've had some buyers that are like, let's start like 50K above. And then in reality, I could have been like, yeah, let's do that. We'll definitely get the deal. But they might have overpaid by 50K. So, I'll say, look, we don't need to do that. In some scenarios, if there's 5 or 6 other offers and the comparable sales are way higher, yeah, you might do that. But in some scenarios, the comparable sales might be lower, or it might be just at market price. So you might not need to do that. So you should do your own research, but also, have your real estate agent send you comparable sales for that subdivision only. Sometimes if you cross a major road or a different subdivision, the prices can be drastically different. So make sure it's recent sales in that subdivision, and then you can make a more educated offer. Next up, you want to get a good inspection. Now, sometimes in a competitive scenario, you might have to drop all contingencies. If they're expecting 3 or 4 or 5 offers and it's your dream house, you might have to waive the inspection contingency. However, what you can do is you can get a pre-inspection where an inspector might go through the house for an hour or 2 just to make sure there's no big issues with the property. And then they can tell you, hey, the roof's a little bit old, or hey, the basement, you might want to keep a humidifier down there. But overall, the house checks out and it's pretty normal for something of its age. And then when you make the offer, you can waive that home inspection contingency. And keep in mind, every property is going to need work over time. There's never going to be a perfect house. I do home inspections sometimes with new construction properties, and there's a list of like 20 or 30 different items on there. And the same way that there's good real estate agents, good lenders, good title companies, there's also good and bad home inspectors. So your real estate agent should give you a couple names. It shouldn't just be one home inspector. There should probably be like 2 or 3 recommended home inspectors, because there are some home inspectors that are terrible. There's some home inspectors that are pretty notorious, at least around here. Every single deal they'll say has like major structural issues, water damage, this and that. And it's almost like their whole business strategy is to like kill every single deal. And now a home inspector, if there is a serious issue, they should definitely alert you to it. But I think I remember reading the reviews of this one inspector, and it's like, this guy almost saved us from buying 5 different houses. And maybe like one or two of the houses might have actually had serious issues, but from knowing this inspector, it's like every single house is like a complete disaster. And the home inspector should be able to tell you what's normal wear and tear versus, what's an actual serious issue. And even if there is a serious issue, you can have an expert look at it. A home inspector is more of a generalist. So let's say there is a serious issue, you can have an expert look at it, or you can estimate a rough approximate cost to fix that, and then factor that into your offer. And then there's also some scenarios where you'd waive a home inspection completely. I mean, I know on a lot of single family houses, and especially with condos and even townhouses, people just waive the inspections completely. If it's a super competitive offer, or maybe you found out that 2 or 3 other people are doing pre-inspections, maybe you just say, look, we'll just waive the home inspection. It is risky, less risky with a condo or a townhouse, more risky with like an older single family house. But then you would just factor in, different repairs. And then myself personally, I've bought like a lot of off-market deals. I don't do home inspections on those because I'm getting them at a discount, and I'm factoring in that, yeah, they probably need some work. There's probably some issues, but we're going to fix those. And there's not always issues. Sometimes there are, but you factor in a little bit of forgiveness with those. If it's a motivated seller and I'm buying at a discount, I'm not going to burden them with a home inspection so I can like nickel and dime them over different things. Next up, you want to look at the history of the home. So you can easily see that on like Zillow or Redfin. You can see like what the last status changes have been. Has the property like been under contract before? Was it bought and sold like every single year for the last 10 years? There's one house in Arlington on this specific road. I want to look up the history, but I see it for sale like every other year. And that would be a little bit of a red flag. And it is a little bit busier of a road, so I'm assuming that's probably the reason why people buy and sell it. But maybe it's haunted, who knows? But it's like every other year this property goes up for sale. It's actually increased quite a bit in value as well. But just look at the history and try to get as much information as possible. And sometimes you might see, hey, they bought it at a great deal, 5 years ago, and now they're selling it for a lot more. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's overpriced. It might just mean, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, that's a completely different market in most markets. And if they bought it off market at a discount from a motivated seller, and maybe they put some money into it, well then yeah, obviously they probably will be selling it for significantly more. You need to look at the comps today. What are properties buying and selling for in that neighborhood, in that condition today? If someone bought it 3 or 4 years ago at a different price, it shouldn't really factor too much into the equation. I had this one property listed, and this buyer's agent who, had basically zero experience and maybe might have done like 1 or 2 deals per year. She was saying, oh, well, the seller paid this price, 3 years ago. And it's just like, that's not what the comparable sales are. What someone purchased a property 3 years ago off market in a completely different condition has almost no relevance on the current sale price. And if there is a big difference in the price, just find out like why, like did they buy it off market? Was it like a foreclosed property? Did they put a lot of money into it? Did the neighborhood go up in value the last few years? You can always ask that information, try to get a better sense of the comps. Next up, when buying a property, I would always recommend you get a survey and also title insurance. So a survey is just going to show you the boundaries of the property. And it's actually not uncommon or unusual whatsoever to have like the neighbor's fence on part of your property, or, sometimes different, almost like different encroachments sometimes. I was talking to a builder friend of mine, and he's seen actual properties built on other people's property lines, where usually, there needs to be like setback requirements and things like that. But you just want to know the survey. It doesn't mean you need to like start a war with your neighbor or anything like that. But if it's like a serious issue, you have to probably figure out some type of solution. But if it's just like someone's fence is a little bit on your lot line, it's probably not that big of a deal. Eventually when you build your fence, you should bring that up. But yes, and also that, especially if you're building a fence, you would want to get a survey done just so you can properly, put the fence on there. And I think most fence companies will require a survey so that they're not building a fence, on someone else's yard. As far as title insurance goes, I would recommend you get title insurance. It's kind of a controversial thing. I think in like Iowa, they don't even have title insurance anymore. And then there's some buyers that will actually waive it. I'd say maybe like 90-ish% of buyers that I work with get title insurance, and that just protects the title of the property if there's any ownership claims, from the historical records of the property, like maybe 10 years ago someone wasn't properly added to the title or something like that, and also like contractor liens, just any issues with the title. So myself personally, I always get title insurance. I sleep a little bit better at night. The title insurance will protect you if there's any issues with the ownership of the property. And another thing to add with that is that I do some development myself. I work with developers. The lenders for those development deals always require require title insurance, and they're pretty much sharks. They're like hard money lenders, basically sharks. And if they require title insurance, I'm like, all right, that's good enough for me. I'll get the title insurance. The next thing you want to do when buying a property is make sure you do a final walkthrough. That's to ensure that the property, number one, is vacant. Believe it or not, if it's like a distressed type of scenario or there's a lot going on, the seller might still be there. I've had properties where it's like the day of closing and you can tell the seller has not moved out yet. So you want to make sure the property is vacant. You also want to make sure there's no new damage. I've had numerous properties where the day of closing, there's been water damage. Like the property has flooded the day of closing because there was heavy rains. So if there's been some type of storm recently, maybe you go there, a few days before just to make sure that a tree hasn't fallen over, that there's no new water or any water in the basement or elsewhere. And then you also want to make sure that they've removed any junk. Sometimes if it's a property that has a lot of stuff in it, they might have not removed all their junk. They might have left a lot of stuff. And then you'll have to pay a handyman to remove all that stuff. And junk removal, you can find people to do it relatively cheap, but it's not like $100. Like you might have to spend $500 or even $1,000 if there's a lot of junk there. And then if you've negotiated some type of repair work, especially if there's several items, you want to make sure you have receipts and you verify that the work has been done. Ideally not the day of closing, ideally a few days before closing, even a week or so before closing, because I've seen it happen so many times when it's like the last hour and the repairs haven't been done, there's no receipts, and it just becomes a huge headache. So try to nip everything in the bud and try to get things done beforehand. Always double check, go there a few days early. And your buyer's agent should be in constant communication with the listing agent to make sure that all of this stuff is getting done. And ideally, you don't even negotiate repairs. You should negotiate a credit. A credit's just gonna be easier for everyone involved. Instead of saying, hey, fix this item, have a licensed contractor do this, and then you repair their work and maybe you're not satisfied with the work, just say, hey, give us a credit for $1,000. We'll take care of it. It's gonna make your life a lot easier, trust me. And it's also better for the seller too, so they don't have to coordinate moving and hiring contractors to do different things. Next up, I'm gonna give you some bonus tips to purchasing properties that could see a big increase in value. And this is actually from the book Zillow Talk. It's definitely worth checking out. But a couple things they said is if you purchase near a Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, or Starbucks, usually within a mile, the chances of those properties appreciating is gonna be much higher than properties outside of that mile radius. And the reason for that is that these companies spend like tens of millions of dollars doing all the research of what is going to be like the best, like trendy, neighborhood that's going to have the most amount of customers, make them the most money. And so they do all types of research. They have a massive staff. And so you can kind of piggyback off of them. And if Whole Foods is going somewhere, purchase near the Starbucks, Trader Joe's, those properties could see a bigger appreciation in value than other properties. And it's also true with those transitional neighborhoods. So if you're looking for like kind of a property that's going to see a lot of increase in value, try to purchase near the trendy neighborhoods, but maybe it's like an older neighborhood that's going through transition, but still has like decent transportation, and it's like a neighborhood or two over from like the hottest neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods have a great chance to appreciate. I believe the Zillow Talk book also talks about purchasing in the neighborhoods, which I'm not even going to get into, but if you know where those neighborhoods are, they could see a big increase in value. So shoot me a text or give me a call at the number below if you're looking to buy or sell in the Washington, D.C. market. Or if you're nationwide, I can put you in touch with a great real estate agent and would love to help. See you on the next one. Bye.